So let's say that a creator thinks that they want to build a membership platform. They think it's going to include live events and some kind of short form courses. Okay, great. Let's see what we can put together. Let's try to get some surveying in front of an audience and go validate that idea. So that's something that we definitely recommend and advocate for, especially, for any creator when they launch something, they are dealing with the dual risk of investing time and energy into it and then also compromising the relationship with their audience. So the more we can kind of de-risk both of those in any enterprise is going to be valuable for us.
And talk more about that validation process, because I think that's obviously really, really important so that you don't get, 50% of the way down and then go, ooh, I actually don't think we want to build that product. How long are those validation processes typically? And maybe if you guys have certain tools that you're using, are you running landing pages and running some, offers to the audience? How deep do you go in that validation process before you're like, okay, for sure, this is it. Our audience really, really wants this, and they're willing to buy it. Because I think that's something you talked about in the pre-interview, was creators make the mistake of thinking that their audience is their customer base, right? There's a big difference between watching your video and pulling out your credit card. That's a really big gap. You got to figure out, if they're willing to.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big differences between kind of typical product development and product strategy is that in the case of a creator, we have a market and we are trying to validate the need within that market. So the lowest fidelity version of this is you throw up a Google form and you say, hey, everybody have a question, fill out the Google form. That will always over index a little bit to your most passionate fans. So that, there's always kind of caveats you want to make within this, with any surveying technique. But the other end of the spectrum, which we are increasingly doing more of, is trying to not necessarily validate the product concept, but more detailed features of the product. So oftentimes we are building functionally what we call feature vignettes. So they are small single screen representations of what a particular feature look like. And then we will build those into a kind of nicely branded type form and then have the creator distribute that across various channels. And with, again, there's the caveat of kind of your most engaged fans are probably going to answer that. So you want to take a bit of a grain of salt with those. But, for creators, we worked with a creator that put a survey like this up on their story, for 24 hours and got 33,000 responses. So it doesn't take long to get to relatively strong statistical significance with some of these. And the answers are almost always surprising in terms of what are going to be the most valuable features and what do we want to build first and what potentially is going to be a bit further down the product roadmap.
And do you ever have them do a test where someone actually has to take out their credit card and pay for, like, hey, pay to save a spot or pay for this one feature to start? Do you ever go that far? I know it's a big risk in terms of if you're asking for money, right? That's a big leap. And especially if you haven't asked for money from your audience before, that's something you have to be aware of as well.
Yeah, definitely. So there's different approaches there as well. One thing that we oftentimes communicate to creators is the leap between $0 and $1 is bigger than, 1 to 400. And so we want to have relatively strong conviction that there is interest in a paid product there. And so it does help sometimes to start with something small. You can also, one of the benefits of creators, you can say, hey, I'm looking to build this. Do you want to do a pre-order? And some people will actually do a pre-order before they build something. That can be a little tricky depending on the complexity of the product, because if you take a pre-order and then it's a 10-month product to build, then there's a bit of a gap there. But with most creators, they will have started to explore potentially different monetization options so we can get a sense of whether there is a willingness from the audience to pay for something. And that's also something we can validate through surveying. And certainly with things like a feature vignette, we can say, hey, this is the rough shape of a product. What would you potentially pay for something like this? Although there's, caveats and grains of salt to the responses there as well.